does look better.
So, I told Elise, sorry, oh my God, I'm not touching anyone. I told Elise to remind her that you're not interested again, so at 2 o'clock.
I'm going to do an announcement.
Fine.
So I'll basically add like quickly because the program is beginning.
Okay, so does she know that?
It's on the sheet. That's what we have here.
Okay.
So it's just at 2 o'clock. Ladies and gentlemen, please.
Got it, yep.
That's the program. Yep.
Can we put the card in that one?
Want to flip it? Yeah. Yeah, can you put the card in the SD? Like a solid state. Good idea.
Never. Right here. How are you?
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats as the program begins.
Welcome. Dad would have loved this. I'm Ben DuPont on behalf of my wonderful mom, Elise, my older sister, also Elise, my older brother, Pierre, my younger brother, Thayer, our spouses, and 10 awesome grandchildren who are mostly there. Welcome to the service celebrating Dad's life. Dad was a lot of things to a lot of people, but a few things really stick out to me. He loved people, not just people that were like him or agreed with him. He loved everyone. While governor, he took up bowling. Not a typical sport for somebody educated at Harvard and Princeton. I asked him why. He said, Ben, I made more friends and gained more votes while losing at bowling than anything else I have done. He was an optimist, and he loved his country. He frequently said there's very little the American people can't do once government is in check. He was constantly amazed at the great innovation our great country can produce. His maternal grandmother, we called her and knew her as Gigi, saw the Wright brothers fly on the Capitol Mall in 1909 and saw Neil Armstrong walk on the moon in 1969. That was a lot of change in one lifetime. And yet he thought he's seen even more with the invention of life-saving drugs and GPS and the internet. But if he were here today, he would say, buckle up, this country's just getting started. And he had a really good sense of humor. He always kept an emergency stash of Snickers bars in his top desk drawer for most of his life. He said they were for emergencies. And I don't know about you, but I aspire to have emergencies where a Snickers bar is the solution. He thought opportunity is why this country was founded, why it prospered, and why it will prevail. He thought all of us should embrace that opportunity that our country has given us and go out into the world and try to make it just a little bit better place. Dad thought the most important sentence yet written, ironically by his namesake's friend, Thomas Jefferson, who wrote, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." I love that sentence. Now, Delaware is and always has been a special place. It played an outsized role in the birth of our nation and produced many great leaders over the years. Such leaders transcend political parties and, perhaps more importantly, understand the value of community, faith, family, and friendships. As we join here together to celebrate the life of one such leader, we are fortunate to have others who share these characteristics. Our next speaker, Delaware 74th Governor John Carney, is an example of one. The parallels between John and my dad are striking. Both born in Delaware, both returned after some time away, both married wonderful women from the area, both raised great kids. I'm a little biased. Both played sports. John at football at St. Mark's, Dad hockey, where he lost all his front teeth to a puck. True story. Both served exactly 6 years in Congress. Both were elected governor of Delaware twice. After serving as governor, Dad ran for president of the United States. I'll let the audience extrapolate what the future might hold for Governor Carney. One had my vote for that office, the other surely would. So it's with great pleasure that I introduce Governor John Carney.
No way, Ben. Good afternoon, everyone. It's so great to see so many people here this afternoon. It feels like a big reunion, and I could tell talking to many of you who are coming in for this celebration, this memorial. Thank you for joining Elise, the Pont family, and friends for this tribute to the 68th Governor of Delaware. I'm privileged to have been asked to offer a few words on behalf of the people of our state. Thank you, Ben and Clara. Growing up in a large Irish Catholic family in Claymont, I admired the public officials that you'd expect. John and Bobby Kennedy, and later Joe Biden. But as I made my way in public service and politics myself, I added someone else to the list. The man whose life and legacy we celebrate today, Governor Pete Pont. In describing his decision to run for governor during a time of crisis and turbulence in our state, Celia Cohen, who's here with us in the audience, wrote in her book, Only in Delaware, and I quote Celia, "As difficult as the times were, DuPont regarded the governorship as an improvement over his lot as the state's lone member in the U.S. House of Representatives. He considered himself what he called a triple minority there. He was from a small state, he was a Republican in an overwhelmingly Democratic chamber, he was a moderate in a caucus run by conservatives." Quote, quote. I can certainly sympathize with Pete's predicament. As a three-term congressman in the minority myself, I was drawn, as Pete was, to run for governor. After I decided to run, I remember being at an event, a holiday event for retired auto workers. One of the guys came up to me and he said, "You know, Carney, I worked at Chrysler for 30 years. I made a good living. I was able to support my family. I like going to work every day. And if there's one thing I learned there, it's that if you have a good job, you keep it. What the heck are you doing running for governor?" Well, I can't imagine what that guy would have thought about Pete's decision to leave Congress to run for governor, given the state of affairs in Delaware in 1976. But it's certainly a testament to Pete's character and his love of our state that he took a very hard job at an extremely difficult time, when he could have done almost anything else he wanted. It's hard to say what would have happened if he hadn't done it, but we know what happened because he did. When Pete took office, the state was a mess. There was a huge budget deficit. The state's credit rating was the lowest in the country. The Farmers Bank, with all the state revenue deposited there, was on the brink of insolvency. Our personal tax rate was the highest in the country. And we had a reputation of being bad for business. Heck, even the DuPont company was unhappy with the business climate here. To make matters worse, political leaders couldn't stop fighting with each other, and the political culture was not much of an improvement over the mess in Washington. Worst of all, nobody believed it could be any different. Nobody except Pete DuPont. Pete pulled our state out of this financial and economic crisis. He instilled fiscal discipline. He restored confidence. Most importantly, he set a new standard for how we treat each other in this state. And he changed our expectations about ourselves. Some call it the Delaware way, others the return day ethic. Whatever you call it, it just meant working together to get things done. It's something we take for granted now, but it was a novel concept when Pete became governor. The changes the DuPont administration brought to Delaware fundamentally changed our wonderful little state. The changes were transformational, and they put the state back on track. As you might expect, they were controversial at the time. Today, though, thanks to Governor DuPont, it's just the way we do business here in Delaware. Our economy today is built on the back of Governor DuPont's decisions, and our state's perfect credit rating is thanks to the budget rules he put in place over 40 years ago. Pete left us a roadmap for success that we've been smart enough to continue to follow. As Delaware's governor, I'm here to attest that Pete DuPont's legacy is so deeply embedded in our state's political culture that most of us in office today never knew any different. And today, our AAA bond rating is a point of pride for everyone, Republicans and Democrats, and Pete made that possible. I can tell you firsthand that being governor is not an easy job. You have to make really difficult decisions, and you end up making a lot of people unhappy. I know Governor Castle is here with us, can attest to that too. And that was true of Pete's tenure more than most. So what I find most remarkable about all of Governor DuPont's many accomplishments is that the people who work with him and for him, and many of them are here this afternoon, genuinely liked him. Even legislators of both parties, and I saw some of them here today as well, speak fondly of the things that they did together. He challenged and disrupted the status quo without disrupting his relationships. He made serious decisions without taking himself too seriously. To be the kind of leader Governor DuPont was, and to be a genuinely nice guy at the same time, is no small feat in any line of work, but especially in politics. And it's that legacy, more than anything else, that we would all do well to preserve. As Ben said, I had the privilege of meeting Governor DuPont after his retirement from public service through my father-in-law, Bill Quillen. Bill and Pete were contemporaries. They graduated from Harvard Law School. They worked in the same law firm early in their careers. As many of you know, Bill was a retired judge and a candidate for governor. He was also a Roosevelt Kennedy Democrat, but he found a kindred spirit in Pete in so many ways. They were friends, and in retirement, they enjoyed each other's intellect and senses of humor. Only in Delaware, Celia. I was lucky to have the opportunity to get to know Pete better through Bill, and to know Pete's son, Thayer and Ben, who have inherited Pete's devotion to our state and making it better for all Delawareans. Like their father, they challenge all of us to do the same. And so to Elise and the whole DuPont family, Tracy and I are here today on behalf of a grateful state to say thank you to you for sharing Pete with all of us. And to pledge to you to continue to do my part as Delaware governor, to carry on his legacy of civility and service to our wonderful state. May God bless you all, and may Pete rest in peace.
If you had drafted a blueprint for constructing a governor, you would have come up with Pete DuPont. Pete DuPont made Delaware believe in itself again.
I believed then that Delaware's governmental problems could be solved, that we could have a government that lived within its means, that we could have a government capable not simply of fulfilling its legal responsibilities, but of improving the quality of life for all Delawareans as well.
Pete was driven by his desire to keep everyone around him happy and enjoying themselves.
Pete DuPont was a visionary. He came into office at a very challenging time, but he had a vision for how Delaware could thrive. And not only did he have the vision for how it could thrive, he knew how to get there.
He was smart, but never acted it.
Pete was an engineer, and that engineering discipline that he had helped him break down an issue like a home builder would break down a house to its studs and then rebuild it.
Pete got it right. By the end of his 2 terms in office, the engineer, lawyer, governor had restored Delaware. He put in place innovations that people today just couldn't imagine the state existing without, like the Rainy Day Fund that protects the state's finances, the Judicial Nominating Commission that screens the applicants for the judgeships, and of course, the Financial Center Development Act, which brought in the banks that revitalized the state's economy and transformed the Wilmington skyline. He
never, I think, looked at the challenges and the problems, the situation at the time, and said, we need to do the things like we've always done them. I think he looked at how can we do it differently.
I think what drew him was just people, the humanity, whether it was less than or more than or whatever. He knew that Delaware could not be half and half.
I think Dad's legacy is innovation, the ability to think about things a little bit differently and do what actually works. I think those two things in combination will be what he leaves behind.
It was hard not to just like him. What an amazing personality. I think of that smile, that twinkle, that laugh, and that spirit of, it doesn't matter what's wrong, we can fix it, we can work this out.
And he was funny. People don't realize it, but he was tricky.
Well, he was always making a joke out of everything. He had the quickest mind of anybody I ever knew. He really could take a circumstance and turn it backwards and make you laugh. He could make anybody laugh, and that really was a gift to have.
He did tell a lot of jokes. He had a pretty wicked sense of humor, and I think he saw humor in many things. And I may have picked up a bit of that because I'm always sort of making light of things and seeing linkages.
We would have some fun together because, again, as I said earlier, you know, it was just he and I. It was before we didn't have Google Maps. You know, we were pulling out a map. I was figuring out little towns where to go and what have you, and we'd have the luggage and the rental car and and all. And there was several times that I'd kind of get lost, and I would do kind of a turnaround, if you will. And he looked at me one day, he goes, "That's a security precaution, isn't it?" And I'd laugh. So he would pick on me with that quite a bit, and I enjoyed it.
Well, his sense of humor was great. He was highly entertaining. You know, his sense of humor came out at different times, unexpectedly sometimes.
He could take something that was simple, like cooking dinner, and he could turn it upside down and have everybody in the room laughing.
You know, he loved music, but he had the worst singing voice. And he said, "Ben, you know, there are two reasons to sing." He said, you know, one is if you have a beautiful voice and you want to share it with the world. And he said the other is if you don't and you want to get even. And, you know, so he was full of these sort of funny stories and truisms.
He always found something to laugh about. That, I think, is one of Pete's most enduring qualities, was his sense of humor. And not that he was belittling anything, not that he was treating anything without the respect or the gravity that it required, but he just had a way of finding something funny to cut the ice.
Robert Penn Warren wrote that we must go out into the convulsion of the world, out of history and into history, and the awful responsibility of time. An awesome responsibility did await us in 1977. Together we seized it and shaped it and used it to go forward, to achieve a better time, to improve the quality of life for all our people.
Pete understood that there's more to politics than politics. In other words, there's no reason to be governor unless you want to try to accomplish something good for your state and your country. Not everybody who gets into politics understands that, but Pete did very well.
He was a patriot. You know, he loved his country. He loved the flag. He loved Delaware.
His love for America and our freedoms and everything we stand for was so strong.
Pete was a friend to all, urging all to be more than they are, to be all they could be, to never say, "I am the best," but I'm being the best I can be.
He's a people person. He meets you on the street. He may know your name, he might not. But he would, if you're talking with him about anything, you're the most important thing going on at that time. It's very, very flattering to people.
He never upbraided anybody, he never screamed at anybody, he never threatened anybody. He was remarkably easy to deal with, and the legislators particularly, who are a very skeptical group, found that to be refreshing. And I think that really ability to deal with other people and to deal with on a personal basis was really one of the reasons why he was so successful.
I think he saw what he could do, what he did in Delaware, and I think he knew that he was a leader and that he had the potential to carry this country forward. Leadership was just in Pete's DNA.
He believed we all had the answer in us, the community had the answer in it. Government was a spark, it was a help, but it should be only big enough to be the spark and the help. And the community, the tremendous potential of the people of Delaware, the tremendous potential of the people in America to do incredible things, things that he couldn't imagine. He genuinely loved serving the public.
He loved his family. That's his great legacy. And I think if he were here today, he would say to you he had a great life and he was a very lucky man. But his greatest gift were his children that he and Elise raised together.
His adoration for his children was marvelous. He was always there for them in one way or another. And it was just a wonderful thing to see. He was such a marvelous man. He really, really loved his family and his state very, very much.
When we all had kids, he loved those grandkids, and even when they were grown up, and he would hang with them and tell them stories, and his engagement on their level. Yeah, he loved both his narrow immediate family and then the extended family. That was his life.
He just said, go out into the world and go do something useful. And I've taken that and run with it in a direction that might have surprised him. But he always gave his children freedom too. He believed it was important that we each express who we were as individuals and give back in our own unique way.
In the summertime, it was sailing, playing wiffle ball in the field, tossing a frisbee. All were just wonderful time he chose to share with us when so many other people wanted a piece of him. Just treasure those moments that he shared himself with us as deeply and personally as he did.
Particularly when you get older as a kid, you realize that your parents' days are numbered and you better enjoy every one of those moments. I think at the end of the day, he really wanted to be judged by just fundamentally making the world a better place. And I think the world is a lot better place because he was here.
Thank you, King Creative and Derwin Johnson, for that wonderful tribute to Dad's life. It captures his essence, and he was a great dad. The four of us are going to tell you a few stories about Dad's life in chronological order. Though I may not always admit it, I am the oldest, so my stories go way back. My parents were 23 and 22 when they had me. My mother was, and still is, a great beauty. People used to stop her on the street to ask for her autograph because they thought she was Grace Kelly. And my dad was the lucky guy who married her. And he often reminded her of how lucky he was. But more important than that, Dad relied on her political instincts all throughout his career. She was his confidant and sounding board. I remember sitting in the back seat of the station wagon, listening to her advising him on different judgment calls, and her instincts were rock solid. She is one of the reasons he came to be known for his integrity. This quality was fundamental to his character, but she helped him see how fundamental it was to his political success. My earliest memory of Dad, however, was the day he showed me how he could pass a pencil right through the middle of my brother Pierre's head, through one ear and out the other. Pierre was just a baby at the time, lying in his crib in Belmont, Massachusetts, with his little feet sticking out and looking up at us And Pierre thought that trick was as funny as Dad and I did. I was probably 3 at the time and quite sure that Dad could actually do this. Dad was also adept at finding pennies in children's ears. And if you're my age or a little bit younger, chances are he found a penny in your ear too. Dad was in the Seabees in the U.S. Naval Reserve in Maine from 1957 to 1960. His primary duties included snowplowing the Brunswick Naval Air Station runway strip. He used to describe the lonely drive from our drafty old house in Monsweg to Brunswick in the dead of night at the beginning of a snowstorm as driving off the edge of the earth. In his 20s, he smoked a pipe. And I still remember the feel of his scratchy wool sweaters and the smell of pipe smoke as I snuggled up to him on the couch. Dad went to law school in 1961, against the wishes of his father, who thought that being an engineer was the only worthwhile career option. And in fact, when it came time to apply for college, Granddaddy only allowed him to apply to Princeton and MIT. Dad was lucky enough to get into Princeton, which was a relief to him because at least at Princeton, he could take literature classes in addition to engineering. He attended Harvard Law School later, and he told me later in life how much studying law had frightened him at the time. Most of the men in his classes were sons of judges or partners in law firms, and they knew the field and its terms. But he went on to win Harvard Law's moot court competition in his final year. So much for that fear.
Yeah. Only Dad's closest friends and his grandchildren, most of whom are here, knew about the series of stories Dad made up, his hoot grunt stories. Dad wove long, elaborate tales for his children, and later for his grandchildren, about a band of animals that terrorized the Middle Flats farms of Fisher's Island, and later Witherspoon Airstrip in North Haven. They had trunks like elephants and 4 little legs that surrounded a wheel. Because of this, hoot grunts could turn on a Roosevelt dime, and when they wanted to go downhill really fast, they lifted up their little legs and wheeled along on their wheel. Herds of them were often seen thundering across the flats or the airfield. They were led by Edward Bear, who carried a diamond nightstick. And Dad used to remind us that there are only 3 diamond nightsticks in the world, one in Edward Bear's possession, one in the British Museum in London, and one at the bottom of the sea. Most of the hoot grunt tales involved young children saving their mothers who had been kidnapped and wrapped in bacon and were in imminent danger of being fried on a spit. And if you ever see someone wearing a baseball cap backwards, you know that he or she is in league with the hoot grunts. That was the signature clothing of a hoot grunt in Dad's view. In addition to his career successes, he was a very accomplished sailor. He recalled that he began sailing when he was quite young, when his father, our granddad, bought him a classic Herreshoff bullseye and left him in the harbor to his own devices to learn how to sail. Worked pretty well. He went on to a long sailing career, including taking a series of trophies at the Royal Swedish Yacht Club Regatta in Sandhamn, Sweden in 1957. His tour in Sweden culminated in winning the King Oscar II Jubilee Cup. This was the first time the Jubilee Cup had ever gone to someone outside of Scandinavia. He competed in the 1958 America's Cup trial races on the 12-meter boat Weatherly, and he made 1 transatlantic crossing and participated in 5 Bermuda races between Block Island, New York, and Bermuda.
So Dad got into politics in 1968. And I barely remember those years, but just a little bit. And he ran for a local seat in Christiana 100 in the state, became a representative in the state of Delaware. So he got 74% of the vote, and which he was proud with. But then it occurred to him that since he'd run unopposed, 26% of the folks would rather had nobody represent them than him. So he carried that humility on with him for the rest of his life. One of the things that was fun to grow up in his house is that we had a stream of fascinating people come by, and Pierre and Elise are a little bit older, so they don't quite, it was probably a different stream of people, but Thayer and I enjoyed many interesting guests from, my one claim to greatness is I had a breakfast with Elizabeth Taylor alone, just the two of us, true story. I was 12, and she came downstairs and asked, and I was eating my Cheerios, and she said, "Miss Taylor, what would you like for breakfast?" And she was a little disheveled and said, "A beer." And so I had Cheerios, she had a beer, and life went on. One of the other guests that was a frequent visitor was Chuck Yeager, I think the man who broke the sound barrier. And Chuck Yeager and Dad became close and shared a lot of stories, and there was a lot of interesting tales. And Dad kept asking Chuck, Chuck, you ought to come sailing with me sometime. And we'd have a lot of fun. He would talk to me. And about the fourth or fifth invitation, Chuck turned to Dad and said, "Pete, why would I want to go 0.001 Mach?" So when Dad was elected governor, it was a little bit of an upgrade for Thayer and I. We grew up in patterns which, for the most part, didn't really have TV reception and did not have air conditioning. And Woodburn, the governor's residence, had both. And this was a big deal for Thayer and I. The cable television and air conditioning we felt like we were in heaven. And so we were only allowed to watch TV from 5 to 6, I believe, right after school. And there was one show on. There weren't a whole lot of options. Local news, which really didn't interest us very much, and a lot of Japanese shows with monsters and tsunamis and things with voiceovers. But there was one automated series that we could identify with a character named Speed Racer. Some of you may remember Speed Racer. And Speed Racer was always getting into some trouble, and there was a guy, his father, they called Pops, who was always coming in to save the day. He would etch the secret plans on the windshield, or he had the microfilm hidden some secret way, and the world was saved, and the bad guys ended up, their plans were derailed, and the good guys always won. And Speed Racer's dad, who did all this, was named Pops. And Thayer and I looked at that and said, "That's like our dad. He solves all the problems. He knows the answers. He has the microfilm hidden in secret places." And so a lot of us call him to this day affectionately Pops, because he knows all the answers. But thank you very much. So in addition to cable TV and air conditioning, Woodburn has the advantage of being close to the Capitol in Dover. As Governor Carney knows, many a June evening and weekend are spent in Dover as the legislature concludes its annual session. Ben and I didn't have much to do on those June weekends at Legislative Hall in Dover, so one day we decided to make paper airplanes. We went up to the balcony of the Senate and House chambers and launched them above the heads of the people hard at work below. Look up the next time you're in Leg Hall and see if any of them remain on the chandelier or the moldings. When Dad ran for president in 1988, he described his platform as 5 damn right issues, the kind of positions that a family sitting around its kitchen table would say, "Damn right, that's exactly what we ought to do." These controversial issues included replacing the Social Security system with private savings accounts, ending farm subsidies, making driver's license
contingent on passing drug tests, replacing welfare with work, and giving parents the option of choosing the public school which their children attended. The intention of this platform was to stimulate real discussion in the country, which he believed was the reason you ran and the reason you wanted the job. He used to say that a legislator's job is to wet his finger and put it up in the air and feel which way the wind is blowing. But the governor or president's job is to make the wind blow. And he certainly did that throughout his career. He enjoyed sailing far into his old age. Woe be to anyone who challenged him on the waters of Penobscot Bay in Maine. A sailboat was the only place where you ever heard him raise his voice. But he was generous with his knowledge and ready to take on any willing crew. Sailing was a vital outlet for his competitive side, but he didn't focus on winning alone. He focused on boats he could sail with his family. He'd much prefer to have spent the day with his family and performed well than spent the day with more accomplished sailors and won. As a result, many glorious summer days in our childhood were spent sailing with him and racing with him. I bet he's out there right now on this beautiful spring day. Tacking his way upwind and strategizing how to beat the competition to the next mark. No doubt he'll find a favorable puff of wind and lead them around. I'm sure he's smiling broadly as he eases his sails and sets off for the finish line. We miss you, Pops. Now, please stand and join us in singing the British Royal Naval hymn, Strong to Save, which was a favorite of Dad's. You'll see the words on the screen as Bruce Barber, the director of music at Christ Church Christiana 100, accompanies us.
Well, it is my great pleasure this afternoon to introduce George Will, who has agreed to say a few words about Dad. Many of you will know Mr. Will as a columnist and a deeply thoughtful author on current affairs. Mr. Will has also been a commentator over many decades for a wide variety of papers and broadcasters, including the Washington Post, the National Review, Newsweek, and NBC. He was awarded the Pulitzer Prize in 1977 and has received many other honorary awards. By the way, Mr. Will commented in the car coming here this morning that while most people think of him as a writer, he thinks of himself as a reader. Think about that for a moment. Mr. Will and Dad were friends for a long time, and I think Dad would have agreed that Mr. Will said the finest thing anyone ever said about Dad. Pete DuPont has the best substance to blather ratio of anyone running for president. I think everyone here would agree that this is exactly what Dad tried to do whenever he spoke. Thank you, Mr. Will.
Back in the mists of history, in 1964, when the world and I and Pete were young, I cast my first presidential vote. I voted for Barry Goldwater, and he lost 44 states. But he set a good example. He took politics, the politics of ideas, seriously, but he took neither politics nor himself too seriously. Pete was like that. Goldwater entered politics in 1948 to run for the Phoenix City Council. And when he did, in a letter to his brother, Barry explained his decision about politics. He said, "It ain't for life and it might be fun." In today's acid rain of political acrimony, it is well to remember that politics in the United States can be, has been, actually it always should be fun. If you don't like to argue, you picked the wrong country. We Americans are an argumentative tribe, and if engaging in spirited arguments among friends, and as Pete understood, our political adversaries can and should be friends, about the future of the world's most admirable nation, if this is not fun, you're not doing it right. Pete did it right and had fun all the way. Pete was, as actually was said of Goldwater, a cheerful malcontent. Today it is difficult to remember a time when it was possible to join the adjective cheerful with the noun malcontent. But because Pete was a cheerful malcontent, he also was a happy warrior. Serious people, grown-ups, do not go into the strenuous business of politics because they are content with the way things are. Rather, they enter politics because they have ideas that they think would improve things. Pete had ideas, including famously those he called damn right ideas. And if someone said to him, "Pete, a lot of your ideas are actually the ideas of the founding fathers," he would have cheerfully responded, "Damn right." It is therefore altogether appropriate that Pete was a native of the first state to ratify the founding generation's great work, the Constitution. The last ratifying state, by the way, was Rhode Island, which validates the suspicion that New England, for all its highfalutin moral vanity, has a thing or two to learn from the mid-Atlantic region. About 4 decades ago, my dear friend Pat Moynihan, a 4-term Democratic senator, said with some chagrin that the Republican Party had become America's party of ideas. Since then, large swaths of Pete's party have developed an aversion to ideas. But at the time, Pat was correct. Pete, who was a precursor of this welcome development, also was a cause of it. Pete understood 2 great truths. One is that ideas have consequences. Indeed, only ideas have large and lasting consequences. Second thing Pete understood is that ideas give weight and dignity to politics. Ideas rescue politics from degenerating into a mere scrum of grasping factions. But ideas are not enough. A politics of ideas without the leavening of cheerfulness can become grim and unforgiving. It is Pete's cheerfulness that American politics today misses most. Some great political leaders leave behind the memory of their distinctive and well-remembered voices. The timbre of Franklin Roosevelt's and Ronald Reagan's voices linger in the nation's memory. Part of Pete's legacy, his gift to a nation much in need of such a gift today, is the memory of his incandescent smile. Pete had, you see, a talent for happiness, including a talent for something integral to happiness, friendship. I never got a chance to cast a presidential ballot for Pete. In 1988, the Republican nominating electorate, not for the first time, Lord knows, or for the last time, failed to recognize the most talented candidate on offer. Of course, Pete's unquenchable good humor was undented by this. He had the civilized person's understanding that although politics is very important, it is not all important. It should not be allowed to eclipse other pleasures, such as those of family and community, and in Pete's case, sailing, and the National Hockey League. Although how such a civilized person as Pete could so love professional hockey more than baseball is to me one of life's enduring mysteries. Pete's expertise as a sailor was surely related to his success as a politician and in government. A sailor learns how to tack into the wind, and a good political leader does not simply go where the wind blows. Rather, a leader knows that he or she cannot control the wind, but need not be controlled by it. A canny political leader moves obliquely, accepting that the political weather limits but does not nullify the ability to maneuver. Pete the sailor and Pete the politician understood this. Pete also was a politician with an engineer's mentality, an interesting combination. His Princeton degree was in mechanical engineering, which means that he, unlike a majority of politicians, was intellectually inoculated against the abiding political sin of indifference to facts and practicalities, present company accepted. Politicians can promise this and that, but a politician with an engineer's mind is necessarily a realist. He knows that if calculations are not made correctly and respected, bridges buckle and dams collapse. But to say that Pete was a realist is not to say that he was tethered to a grim realism. There was nothing grim about Pete. Winston Churchill said that meeting Franklin Roosevelt was like opening a bottle of champagne. Pete was like that. He was a tonic in human form, a stimulant for all who had the pleasure of his company. If you visit the Yankee Doodle Tap Room at the Nassau Inn in Princeton, 75 miles north of here, you will see a photo of Pete as he was in Princeton's class of 1956. He is, of course, smiling, and even in a black and white photo, his smile lights up the room. Pete strode through life with a spring in his step as though he had a song in his heart. Perhaps the song was Princeton's alma mater, Old Nassau, which begins, "Tune every heart and every voice, bid every care withdraw." We who are here today will evermore have the delight of having known Pete, whose presence in our memories bids every care withdraw. It has been well said that some people were so large in life that they take up space in our lives, even when they are gone, which means, of course, they're never really gone. A teacher never knows when his or her influence ends. And for a few rare political figures such as Pete, the happy truth is that the radiating influence of their well-lived lives need not end. It is for us to measure up to the gold standard of Pete's example as a father, friend, citizen, and patriot. I thank you for the privilege of allowing me to participate in today's remembrance, as I am everlastingly thankful for the privilege of having known Pete. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Will. It's a real privilege to have you here today. Reverend Ruth Beresford is the 15th rector of Christ Church, Christiana 100. Christ Church is one of the 4 congregations founded from the Sunday school held for the DuPont powder mill workers and their children in the early 19th century. Reverend Beresford has served Christ Church for 14 years, having previously served congregations in Philadelphia and Montgomery, Pennsylvania, and on Capitol Hill and Washington, D.C., while she attended the Virginia Theological Seminary. Reverend Beresford.
Let us pray. Eternal Father, strong to save and swift to bless, we thank thee for thy servant Pete. We praise thee as we recollect his life and cherish his memory. In gratitude, receive our tribute for a life well lived as a husband and father, a sailor and friend, and a citizen in service to this state and this nation. We bless thee that in bearing thine image, he has brought light to our lives, for we have seen in his friendship reflections of thy compassion, in his integrity, demonstrations of thy goodness, in his intellect, the gift of thy wisdom, and in his fidelity, glimpses of thine eternal love. Grant to each of us, beloved and bereft, the grace to follow Pete's good example, so that we with him may come into thy everlasting kingdom, where thy saints are gathered from every tribe and language, people and nation, from generation to generation, united in joy and felicity before thy throne. With this prayer and all our praise, we join our voices in one solemn prayer, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Thank you very much, Reverend Beresford. Thank you also to my sister Elise and Stephanie Johnny, the Executive Director of the Pete DuPont Freedom Foundation, for organizing today's events and doing it twice, as the Delta variant stopped us from holding this event last September. We've shared some stories today. I'm sure many of you have them too. If you'd like to get them on tape, Derwin Johnson, who covered Dad's presidential campaign for ABC and who put together the video montage that you saw earlier, is going to be in the Christina room and ready to capture your thoughts, so please stop by. As some of you know, Dad was a lifelong Flyers fan. He regularly attended Sunday night games with family and friends. He used to say that the only comparable experience to going to the Flyers was going to church, because in both settings, just about everyone in the building was on the same side. To honor Dad's passion for the game, the Flyers, and his love of our country, we would like to close out this service with a special song. As with every sports team, the national anthem is sung before every game. On special occasions in Philadelphia, they roll out God Bless America. In the 1970s, Kate Smith sang it. Over the past 2 decades, Lauren Hart has been the voice of the Flyers and has performed it. Lauren would have been with us here today, but the Flyers are playing tonight in Philadelphia. So graciously, she agreed to pre-record the song while wearing Dad's Flyers jersey. After the song, please join us down the hall in the Gold Ballroom for a reception. And now, please stand and join Lauren Hart in the singing of God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her through the night with the light from above. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. From the mountains to the prairies, to the oceans, white with foam. God bless America, my home, sweet home. God bless America, my home.